How much does a parent owe a child? It is the most sacred contract in the human experience. We are meant to be shielded, molded, and loved unconditionally. We build our world on the belief that family is a foundation, a safe harbor. But for a select few, the ones who would go on to shape history, for better or for unimaginable worse, that foundation was poison, and that harbor was a cage. The people we are about to reveal didn't just fail their children, they betrayed them. They used them as weapons, shields, and tools in their own selfish games. This is a story about the unseen trauma that becomes the unseen fuel. It's about the deep psychological wound that forces a child to become a monster, a legend, or a casualty. You know their names. Now, you will finally know the truth of their nightmare parents. Our journey begins in the bloody, ruthless world of Imperial Rome, with a mother whose ambition was a political atomic bomb, Agrippina the Younger. Her son? The tyrannical, infamous Emperor Nero. Agrippina didn't see a child. She saw a crown waiting to be claimed. Every gentle word, every maternal gesture, was nothing more than a carefully crafted piece of propaganda. She saw the adoption of Nero by her own uncle, Emperor Claudius, not as a family merger, but as a hostile political takeover. She poisoned her husband to get her son on the throne. Let that sink in. This is the very definition of toxic ambition. Agrippina didn't teach Nero to rule with wisdom. She taught him to rule with fear, suspicion, and lethal force. She was the one who pulled the strings, micromanaging every decree, every public appearance. Nero was a boy puppet, and she held the leash. I mean, what kind of monster must you be to sacrifice your husband and poison the most powerful man in the world? Simply to install your own child as a tool? For years, the power imbalance held, but power is a corrosive poison. Once Nero tasted absolute control, the debt of his childhood became due. He recognized the pattern, seeing his mother as his first and most dangerous rival. The manipulative training she gave him was now turned back on her. He tried to poison her, but she was immune. He tried to drown her in a collapsible boat. When she swam ashore, he finally sent a squad of assassins. The mother who used her son to claim the empire died by the hand of the monster she created. When they brought him the news, Nero supposedly inspected his mother's body, the body that bore him, and coldly remarked on her beauty. It was a chilling testament to a childhood where love was a currency of murder. Now, we face the darkest legacy of all, one that proves the generational scar of bad parenting can shatter the world itself. We look at the childhood of Adolf Hitler and the man who forged his early rage, his father, Alois Hitler. Alois was a domineering, cruel, and rigid figure, a middle-class civil servant whose personal instability was projected entirely onto his family. He was a petty tyrant in his own home, prone to violent rages fueled by alcohol. The family was small, but the atmosphere was suffocating. Young Adolf was a mediocre student with a fragile artistic temperament, and his father hated it. Alois demanded traditional, practical success and brutally disciplined his son for any sign of weakness or artistic inclination. The beatings were frequent and severe. Question: if every dictator is a product of their environment, how much of the world's greatest tragedy began simply with a belt in a small Austrian village? You can share your thought in the comments section. The most crucial dynamic here is the relationship with authority. Alois was the first ultimate authority figure in Hitler's life, and he was capricious, unjust, and violent. Hitler's adult political ideology, his fascination with absolute power, his hatred of dissent, his need for complete obedience, and his overwhelming, blinding rage is a mirror image of the trauma he endured. He learned early that power is defined by absolute dominance, and that obedience is secured by fear. The unfulfilled, rejected boy grew up to demand the total surrender of an entire nation. The rage that was locked inside a small house in Austria eventually burned down a continent. This is the terrifying reality. The personal failures of one father to show love, respect, or even basic kindness were amplified through history, becoming the blueprint for a regime that embraced violence on a scale the world had never known. The rage that drove Alois to beat his son became the ideology that drove Hitler to destroy millions. We jump to the gritty suburbs of Gary, Indiana, for a story of performance, power, and pain that defined modern celebrity. This is the truth behind the king of pop and the father who turned a gifted child into a traumatized, untouchable icon. Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson was a predator of opportunity. He didn't nurture the talent of his sons. He weaponized it. The Jackson family home was not a place of comfort. It was a military training camp run by a man who equated discipline with physical and psychological terror. The accounts are consistent and horrifying. Belts, whips, and constant soul-crushing verbal abuse. Michael Jackson himself famously recalled Joe wearing a mask to scare him, standing in the doorway after midnight, a tactic designed to instill a perpetual state of anxiety and fear that would follow him for the rest of his life. Guys, can we truly separate the genius of an artist like Michael Jackson from the deep, paralyzing fear that fueled his relentless perfectionism? Was his global fame a triumph, or merely an escape route from a childhood he could never truly leave? Go ahead and tell us what you think. Joe Jackson carved his son into a superstar, but he carved out the boy's humanity in the process. Michael was forced to work, perform, and deliver, stripped of any normal childhood experience. The price of their success was the destruction of Michael's identity. The relentless drive for fame, the need for validation, the eventual desperate desire to reclaim a lost childhood. All of it traces directly back to the tyrannical figure of his father. The most famous voice in the world was born from the terror of silence. While Joe Jackson reaped the millions and the fame, Michael was left with a lifelong legacy of profound loneliness, psychological fragmentation, and chronic pain. This wasn't parenting. It was a brutal, successful, and globally televised extortion of talent. Let's consider another one, where a mother turned her daughter into gold, and in the process, destroyed her. Look at this image. This is the Judy Garland the world knows. Young, beautiful, spotlighted, and smiling brightly for the crowd. But here's the secret, hidden in plain sight. A subtle, almost imperceptible tear welling in one eye. She's performing happiness, but she's living something else. And casting a shadow over that entire moment behind the stage lights, the dark silhouette of one person, Ethel Gum. Ethel Gum was not a manager, she was a warden. Take a good look at her portrait. Stern, unsmiling, with an intense gaze. This woman didn't see her youngest daughter, Frances Ethel Gum, as a child. She saw her as a product. You can almost feel the ambition radiating off her. The blurred image in the background isn't family photos, is it? It's a financial ledger or a contract. Judy Garland herself later called her mother the real Wicked Witch of the West, and honestly, it's hard to argue. Ethel drove Judy relentlessly from childhood. Studio executives didn't help either. By the time Judy was on the MGM lot, she was on a crushing schedule. Look at her now, utterly exhausted, slumped in a director's chair on a dimly lit set. Her body was treated like a machine that just had to keep running. And when a young girl's body starts to fail from exhaustion and dieting, what did the adults in her life do? They found a quick fix. Here's the close-up. A cold, sterile nightstand with a glass of water and those small, unlabeled pill bottles. Uppers to make her energetic for the cameras, downers to force her to sleep. Judy's life was an endless, manic cycle. The cycle of addiction that destroyed her started right here, handed to her by her mother and the studio. Judy gave the world Over the Rainbow, a song about finding a place where troubles melt like lemon drops. But for her, the dream became a prison. This image is chillingly perfect, a vibrant, beautiful rainbow, but the arcs are made of subtly woven chains, trapping the small, melancholic figure beneath it. Her greatest success became her greatest trap. The fame never stopped, but neither did the pain. Here is the adult icon, caught in a desperate silhouette, looking back over her shoulder, trying to run away from the swirling vortex of stage lights and applause. She was running from a childhood that was stolen, but she could never outrun the trauma that made her a legend. If you could talk to a young Frances Gum, what is the one piece of advice you would give her before she became Judy Garland? Tell us in the comments. Now we move from the glamour of Hollywood to the darkness of provincial Georgia. This is Vissarion Jugashvili, a cobbler, and the father of Joseph Stalin. His portrait is gritty and stark. A troubled face, steeped in alcoholism and palpable anger. Bessarion was a violent man who frequently beat his only surviving son, Ioseb. Every tyrant starts as a child. This is young Ioseb, the future Stalin, cowering in the corner of a dark, sparsely furnished room. Look at the overwhelming scale of the looming, blurry shadow of his adult hand, raised in anger. What was Ioseb's earliest lesson? Not love, not education, but pure, paralyzing fear. This trauma forged the armor he would wear for life. We have to understand the world from the child's perspective. This low-angle shot, looking up at the heavy, worn boots of his swaying, angry father, perfectly captures that feeling of total powerlessness. When your father is the embodiment of uncontrolled, violent force, you learn that strength is everything, and vulnerability is a weakness. But here is the most chilling moment. The young, scared boy's face slowly, relentlessly transitions into the stern, unyielding, cold mask of Joseph Stalin. The trauma didn't break him. It reconstructed him. The beaten boy did not escape his monster. He became the monster that hurt him, ensuring he would never be powerless again. How do you conceptualize terror on a national scale? It started in one tiny, violent space. This is a stylized floor plan of his small, desolate Georgian cottage. But watch as the lines of the home transform into the harsh, stark barbed wire fences of a gulag camp. The small domestic terror of his childhood became the expansive, systematic terror of his empire. Decades later, standing as one of the most powerful men in history, the dictator's eyes are cold and unforgiving. Yet, subtly visible in the shadow or a distorted reflection, is the faint, terrified face of his younger self. Stalin could make millions of people disappear, but he could never erase the frightened child within him. Question: the abuse Stalin suffered was horrific, but does a traumatic childhood ever excuse the brutality of a tyrant? Give us your honest opinion. These 5 stories, the emperor, the Hollywood star, the pop star, and the dictators, span millennia, continents, and entirely different worlds of power. But they share one chilling, singular bond: a parent whose darkness became the child's destiny. This is the hidden history, the true crime of the soul. It forces us to ask, how many famous lives, brilliant careers, or devastating crimes were simply the echo of a broken home? The scars these children carried were not hidden. They were simply repurposed as power, performance, or persecution. The pain became their fuel, their defining, and often destructive force. They were never truly free, forever bound by the toxic chains of their childhood. This conversation can't end here. The true lesson of history is that understanding the root of the trauma is the first step to breaking the cycle. We need to hear from you. Which historical figure do you believe was most fundamentally shaped by the cruelty or neglect of their parents? Drop your theories, your facts, and your deepest thoughts in the comments below. Like this video to unlock more hidden historical truth, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next dark chapter. The deepest secrets of history are often the ones closest to home. We'll see you next time.